The issue, lax regulation, may be a factor in the crashes of two Boeing 787 MAX 8 jets. The stakes, the consequences of small government, can loom large at 30,000 feet. In the days after a Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet crashed in Ethiopia on March 10, the second to go down in 6 months, dozens of countries ordered the planes grounded, with one particularly conspicuous holdout, the United States of America. Even as at least 27 airlines had stopped flying MAX 8, the Federal Aviation Administration was saying there was no basis to order grounding the aircraft, 157 lives in Ethiopia and 189 souls in Indonesia notwithstanding. It took 3 days after the crash for the FAA to finally decide it had a basis, or, it almost seemed that it had no excuse to keep delaying. In the days since, there has been time for reflection on what the two tragedies exposed about what's wrong with regulation in the U.S., not just in aviation, but in other areas as well. It has become clear that while the problems didn't start with President Donald Trump, his approach has made things worse. This deep-rooted problem goes back to the birth of federal regulatory agencies in the late 1800s, starting with the Interstate Commerce Commission, created in response to complaints from farmers and merchants about high prices and abuses by railroads. The ICC and later commissions quickly came to include representatives of the industries they were to regulate, their expertise supposedly being needed. The potential for conflicts of interest, though, was just as quickly visible. Further complicating things are often conflicting roles. Regulatory commissions and agencies that oversee industries often are expected to also foster them in global markets. Trump has taken the industry-friendly regulatory approach to new heights, or lows, from a public protection point of view. It's not just the absurd appointments he has tried to make, like naming his personal pilot to head the FAA or choosing a White House physician who gave him a flattering check-up to run the Veterans Administration. It's the many other appointments of aviation, Wall Street, education, and energy lobbyists, executives and directors to top roles in the FAA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Interior, Education, Commerce, and Agriculture departments. To one degree or another, they share the anti-regulation mindset that demands, we trust industry and supposedly free markets to act out of enlightened self-interest for the good of all. That faith is hard to sustain when a company like Boeing offers critical safety features, which could have prevented two crashes that claimed 346 lives, optional, and for an extra cost. When airlines, looking to squeeze every dollar of profit they can, decide not to spend that extra money. When pilots are given courses on iPads instead of flight simulators, and are not trained to deal with the very crises that led to these crashes. And when the FAA still insists that its strategy of saving money by letting aircraft manufacturers inspect and certify their own jets is better than spending $1.8 billion a year, out of a more than $4 trillion federal budget, to hire government inspectors instead. You know, people whose only loyalty is to the job of protecting the public. All worth contemplating, if not praying over, the next time you fly.